In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll explain the process for adding a ribbon facing to the front bands of a cardigan. If you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, you can tap or mouse over the video playback area of the screen to reveal the chapter titles and starting points of each section. A ribbon facing adds stability to the front bands, preventing vertical stretch on the button band, particularly if the buttons are heavy. On the buttonhole band, the ribbon adds stability by preventing horizontal stretch at the edge of the hole. I do want to mention that while I have added ribbon to a number of cardigans previously, I was thrown a bit of a curveball during the process of adding the ribbon to this cardigan because of the shape of the buttons. Most of the video is geared toward my standard process, which assumes flat buttons, but toward the end of the video, I'll explain briefly how I modified my standard process in order to accommodate the odd shape of these buttons. You have a few choices for ribbons that will work well to face the front edges of your cardigan. So satin ribbon can work, or grosgrain ribbon can work. Both of these are grosgrain ribbon, and grosgrain often comes in fun prints as well. And then the third type is Petersham ribbon, which I typically only see at actual fabric store, not like a big box craft store. So like the Joann's where I live, you buy these types of ribbon by the spool, but in a fabric store or from an online notions seller, you would get Petersham ribbon by the yard. They all come in different widths, and so you want to pick the one that has the width that's appropriate for your front bands. So if you have a ribbed band that is an inch wide, then you're going to want to get something narrow. If you have a ribbed band at the front that's a couple inches wide, you're going to want a wider ribbon to face the front of your cardigan. Pin the ribbon at the top of the front band, leaving about 1/4 of an inch or so of ribbon extending past that pin. That raw edge will be folded under when it's sewn down. And then place another pin in the ribbon where it meets the bottom edge of the band. Don't cut the ribbon just yet. We want to confirm that this is the correct length. Hang the sweater on a dress form if you have one, or try the sweater on and check in the mirror that the pin still hangs at the bottom edge. Gravity can cause a sweater to grow in length when it's worn. So you want the ribbon to be long enough for the band as it is worn. So if the sweater has grown, change the location of the pin to mark where that lower edge is. And then cut the ribbon about 1/4 of an inch past that pin, because again, that will be folded under, that raw edge will be folded under when it's sewn down. Now cut the second ribbon to match the length of the first one. Pin the ribbons into place on the front band. So if your sweater is longer when it hangs vertically than when it's lying on the table, you're going to need to stretch the knitted band to fit the length of the ribbon. Divide the ribbon into halves and quarters, and then I also divide the band into halves and quarters, and I just mark a pin in each of those locations, and then I match up the locations of the pins so that as you are pinning the ribbon to the knitted fabric, you can stretch the knitted band to fit the length of the ribbon. For the buttonhole band, mark the buttonhole placement with a water-soluble pen or pencil. So you just stick it through the buttonhole and mark it onto the ribbon. Your buttonholes might be horizontal or they could be vertical relative to how the sweater is worn, so pay attention to that. And if you knit yarn over buttonholes, you can choose whichever direction you want to make them in the ribbon. The buttonholes in the bands need to be about 1/8 of an inch larger than the buttons themselves, because the ribbon is woven and it's not going to stretch, and so it needs to be larger than the button. Use tearaway stabilizer on the back side of the ribbon as you sew the buttonholes. Sew the ribbon into the band using hem stitch. So bring the needle up through the ribbon, the edge of the ribbon, and then directly out from the edge perpendicular to the ribbon. catch the thread under the leg of a knitted stitch and then poke the needle up through the ribbon 1 or 2 ribs further along if you're using grosgrain or Petersham. The buttons I chose for my sweater are small and irregularly shaped. They're not at all flat. So I found the standard buttonhole wasn't going to work for this particular sweater. The buttons are just awkward to handle. They're difficult to get through any buttonhole. So instead I used a variation on a technique I found in Principles of Knitting, which was to create a V-shaped opening that would stabilize the edge of the buttonhole, but it would also maintain the stretchiness of the knitted buttonhole. And the buttons are still awkward to push through, but I found it was really necessary for these particular buttons because their size and shape are just so awkward. And because the cardigan is a V-neck, I won't actually need to unbutton or button it to take it off or put it back on. Ribbon facings aren't just for cardigans that have buttons and buttonholes. In this cardigan here, I have a stockinette front and I used ribbon in order to prevent that front edge from curling. And in the cardigan I'm wearing here, I don't have buttons either, but I do have clothing magnets inside, and I wanted to use grosgrain buttons to stabilize the fronts and also hide those magnets. I have a video on how to add these sorts of magnetic closures, which you can find over here. And I also have a video on how to sew on buttons in order to give yourself enough room between the 2 pieces of knitted fabric. If you have any comments or questions about this video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see, you can leave those down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.